We watched Ivanka Trump walk in like she owned the place.
Right.
She's now on the stand, a very different moment. Most people get very nervous when you're sitting there and having to be questioned under oath. I am curious, she's the fourth member of the Trump family to testify. What are they going to try to get out of her? Because she is not, in this case, she was taken out of this case as a defendant.
Well, she does add some important elements here. For example, she was the principal person for the Trump Organization that did the negotiations for the old post office building that was turned into that hotel that Donald Trump used to house various foreign diplomats to get lots of money for himself while he was president. But what she really did was, in negotiating with Deutsche Bank for the loan, $170 million loan, it was very clear that Deutsche Bank wanted personal financial statements from Donald Trump, not only to make the $170 million loan, but to keep it going all of those years. And the reason is obvious. Donald Trump filed for bankruptcy 6 different times. Right. And what it does is it undercuts his testimony last week that the banks really didn't care. They clearly cared. And if the AG is careful, they will delineate all of those conversations about how important those financial statements were to getting that $170 million loan.
Can you give us sort of an overview of what hangs in the balance here? Because we're hearing all these details, you're seeing all these family members come up, you're seeing the contention between Donald Trump and the judge, the lawyer, his lawyer, and the judge. But ultimately, this is over fines, right? And money, correct?
Lots of money, at least $250 million the AG is trying to receive. And basically at this point, Donald Trump is toast. I mean, he is basically going to be found to be a liar by the judge here. What people haven't focused on is not just his testimony last week, right, but it's also the testimony he gave in his deposition where he took the Fifth Amendment over 400 times. Now, what does it mean to take the Fifth Amendment? It means that you are refusing to answer a question because a truthful answer would tend to be incriminating. Then what did Donald Trump do last week? He went into court and said, oh, I didn't do anything fraudulent. I wasn't involved in a fraud, which is just the opposite of what, in effect, he was saying when he took the Fifth Amendment in his deposition. So you've got contradictory testimony. You can use his assertion of the Fifth Amendment against him to basically find that he's lying, that he's manipulating the system when he goes in, refuses to answer questions, answers the questions in a half-baked manner. I just don't see how this judge, at the end of the day, is not going to find that with respect to Donald Trump, liar, liar, pants on fire.
I knew you were going to say that, and that is where we're going to end it here. We're going back to elementary school, but it is elemental. There are things that you're either telling the truth or you're not on the stand,
right,
or in a deposition. And we should mention, everybody has the right to plead the fifth, but this is a civil trial, not a criminal trial.
Correct. That
can get you in trouble in the civil trial as opposed to a criminal trial.
Well, particularly when you take an opposite position.
Right.
I have been practicing civil law for well over 40 years. I have had a number of defendants take the Fifth Amendment. I have never seen anybody do such a stupid move as to suddenly start testifying after you've taken the fifth.
Yeah, very unusual move. Nick Eyerman, thank you. It's always nice to see you.
Let's get an update now with CNN Chief Legal Affairs Correspondent Paula Reed. Paula, court currently on a lunch break. Walk us through what we saw earlier in the day.
Well, this has been much less chaotic and contentious than it was when her father and her brothers have taken the stand in this case. So far, the questions have been focusing on her time at the Trump Organization before she left work at the White House in 2017. And they've asked about some specific projects that she worked on. Let's take, for example, the Doral, Trump Doral down in Florida, the resort and spa. She was working on the financing for that project. And in one really notable exchange, they show how the bank wanted Trump to maintain a net worth of $3 billion in order to have these more favorable loan terms, but she suggested lowering that threshold to $2 billion. Now, they settled on 2.5, but Boris, that is significant because at the heart of this case is an allegation that he was maybe not being honest about his net worth. And at the time, he had cited his net worth back then in 2011 as being around $4 billion. They also asked about the old post office here in Washington, D.C., which they converted into a Trump hotel, and how the government had questions for her about exactly how they had compiled their financial statements Now, they also asked her about a penthouse apartment that she had in one of her father's buildings. It had a purchase option of $8.5 million, but in her father's personal valuation, it was valued at $20.8 million. So all this goes to the heart of the case, but so far they've really been focused on pretty technical questions. It's been pretty calm, pretty professional. Quite a contrast to what we've seen over the past few days.
Yeah, and we should point out she's not a defendant in the case, but she could provide valuable testimony for the prosecution. Paula Reed, thank you so much for that. Let's dig deeper now with former U.S. Attorney Harry Litman. Harry, thanks so much for being with us this afternoon. What did you make of Ivanka's testimony so far?
Well, as Paula said, it didn't seem as electric and contentious. If you just wandered into the trial, you would think, in fact, it was kind of dull. And at many critical junctures, she said, I don't recall. But it was important because she really fills in an important piece of the puzzle. She's the one who does take control of getting financing of both the projects that Paula mentioned. And in order to get it, the regular Deutsche Bank commercial real estate order will not deal with them. They have to go to the private wealth management group for super rich people. Ivanka is the one that puts that together. That's how they get a much better interest deal, but it requires Trump to sign on and attest year after year that he has this net worth that is almost certainly going to turn out to be a lie. So even though there's no dramatic moment where she betrays daddy, nevertheless, she fills in why he needed to say that and why, in fact, the counts in the complaint that say he lied about it it strengthens exactly those counts.
So, Harry, let's sort of clarify that point, because it was significant when she testified to confirming what was in that email that said that she suggested that he should lower his minimum net worth in that Deutsche Bank deal to $2.5 billion, I should say. How does that play into what prosecutors are looking for here? Isn't it admission that he was inflating his net worth previously?
I mean, not exactly, but it shows she knows it's an issue. And even more to the point, Boris, she is the one who deals with the banker there and says, oh my God, this is a great rate, let's go for it. And writes her and says, you're the best, Rosemary. It shows that they get this great deal only because Trump makes these promises. That's the important evidentiary point. Then they will show independently these promises that he made were lies, and he repeated them year after year. So she really does establish the relationship and set up for the falsity that they are proving otherwise from Trump's statements.
When it comes to her testifying that she couldn't recall a number of different financial dealings, specifically on the penthouse that she leased from her father, his valuation like $12 million more than what it actually was worth. How does the Trump team read that testimony, the fact that she doesn't recall some of these things?
I think in general, where she could avoid hurting him, she did, and there wasn't a moment in this testimony that really added to things. But it was the testimony that she'd already given before. So I think in general, as Paula says, she's poised and polite, quite a contrast to the other Trumps, and she does disavow recalling certain big points. But what they are going to use her for, have used her for, is to really set up Trump's lies themselves. She otherwise doesn't advance the ball, but that advance is a pretty big advance.